Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We've had a week off, but today I'm joined by our soy envoys. I'm Kelsey Litchfield coming to you from West Central Illinois. Before we go around and get our updates from around the state, I just want to give a quick planting progress crop update from the USDA. So the week ending May 26th, soybean planting in Illinois has reached 72%, surpassing the 5-year average, and that's up, way up from last week's 58%. So a lot of beans going in the ground. Additionally, 44% of soybeans have emerged, although they don't have any condition ratings yet. Corn planting progress is 80%, up from 67% the previous week, and that's right about average. Corn emergence stands at 65% with condition ratings showing 24% fair, 54% good, and 18% excellent. And then winter wheat headed is at 93%. Condition is rated as 51% good, 22% fair, and 12% excellent. And I know the Illinois Wheat Association had their tour, was it a week ago ish? So we can talk about that more. So, first, let's go around, give our updates. I've been hearing a lot of they want people to stop saying rain makes grain because rain is not making grain right now, although maybe some beg to differ. So, Stephanie, you want to go ahead and start? I know you were out and about last night traveling around.
Yeah, it's called playing catch up, right, Kelsey? Yeah. So, I did get to the farm last night. I think there's just been a lot of growth. We have a lot of different planting dates, so that's interesting to me, not so much to my brother. But gosh, that late planted corn looks really good. That's one of our best stands that we've had in that I've seen as an agronomist in a really long time. So I don't want to jinx that. We have usually plant in April, and we usually have some crusting issues sometimes. Not to say that that hinders the yield too much, but I was really surprised, not surprised, but happy. We have got our post herbicide application on. We really needed it. The weeds were coming on strong. So as soon as it dried up, we were able to do that. We are not finished planting. There were some others in the area that I talked to over the weekend that were just finishing up, and that were finished. So it just depends where you are and where the rains fell, and some of those pop-ups fell on that one field that you need to get planted. So,
Thanks, Stephanie. Let's head over to Drew up in northern-ish Illinois.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, I've actually got a little different look. Heading back, we've had some regional meetings in St. Louis the last few days, so actually driving up from there back into the territory. So it's unique to see corn that's actually behind what I'm used to walking in the territory down here south of Springfield. That's probably the first time I've ever really seen that. But yeah, I would say outside of kind of a few one-off situations, we're pretty well done with planting the first time throughout the majority of the territory. We are starting to deal with our fair share of kind of what I would say secondary economic issues. So we did have some hail that Monday afternoon, mid-afternoon weather event that kind of went through the northern part of the territory. Did dump some pretty good size hail. It wasn't, I guess, big diameter, but just a lot of it throughout kind of that Route 80 corridor, just coming in out of Iowa. So actually running up to look at a little bit of that now. So there's a possibility of maybe some soybean replant out of that. Corn, it would have to really be big and really have to have some damage to justify that. But then also seeing a decent amount of cutworm feeding, especially in organics. There's actually a decent amount of organics around that. Again, that Route 80 kind of corridor, Princeton area. And we are seeing in that a decent amount of cutworm damage. What's been intriguing is that it's actually been we're seeing more of it in areas that had heavy tillage, which normally we would coincide that with lower tillage, cover crops, things like that. I'm actually seeing less of it in that and more of it around tillage for some reason this year. So that's a little intriguing. But outside of that, everything, most of the territory is moving right along.
Thanks, Drew. Let's head it over to Craig. How are you this morning, Craig?
Doing well, doing well. I haven't been out a lot this past week, but I could say that not everything is planted. Just I know talking with some of my colleagues as far as in the breeding trials, they have not been able to plant down by St. Louis. So I think that's an area that's still struggling to get things in the ground. We do have some things that aren't planted by design, so I don't really count that. But the other stuff, like I said, down around St. Louis, that they do have seed, it's ready to go. It just hasn't been able to go. Um, last week when I was out a little bit, was noticing some of the ponding areas were starting to yellow up. So I wonder if we were losing a lot of nitrogen there in the ponds from denitrification. Post spraying is going strong or picking up. I've gotten some notices not to go to fields because they're getting sprayed. So that's picking up. Um, I did see a little cutworm feeding also last week, but it was definitely small enough that it was just a plant here and there, nothing alarming. So things to keep an eye on, but not a lot of differences from what we've heard already. The thing I would think about is just the replant situation where we've had all these ponds and the people that have been unfortunate that have gotten a lot of rain. They're probably still waiting for them to dry out. And so when they get back in, how do we tackle those pieces? I think would be some questions we'll be getting soon.
Yeah, and Kelly Robertson, who couldn't be here this morning, he emailed me yesterday, and you talked about St. Louis and then going even further south. Here's what his report was. He said Sunday, 1 to 4 inches of rain with 7 inches locally. Rain in the forecast Saturday through Thursday. And then he says, and I quote, "Nothing good is going on and no one is in a good mood." So
Yeah.
there are definitely definitely delays down there, and I know Prevent Plant has been in the conversation for them as well. So we'll keep an eye on that and hopefully get Kelly on. He can report that. I know he's extremely busy with things too. So
Sure.
if you hear anything else happening down in Southern Illinois, feel free to mention it.
The other thing I will mention is some of the, I'm guessing it's sandblasting that has happened at some of our northern corn locations over there with all the wind. I haven't seen the fields, but I just gotten reports that, hey, if you go, it's probably going to be, maybe an ugly look, and that's what they're assuming it was, which I'm quite confident that's what it was. So.
Yeah, Karen, you want to talk about that? You reported that in one of your crop reports.
Yeah, we had quite a few wind warnings in Woodford County, McLean County. The interstates were shut down right around north of McLean, Illinois. There's a lot of damage to the corn from the sandblasting from the wind. The soybeans look pretty good. So basically, the soybeans had enough cover that the wind didn't blow from them, but the cornfields got pretty much sandblasted. So that's where it came out of. It was a north-south planted field. The curves right above, or right north of McLean, Illinois. That's where it blew in, and that's where they shut down the interstate here. So we've had several warnings. I was there a week ago. I'm kind of waiting to go back. Hopefully it recovers. They haven't had a lot of moisture since then, but they have had good sunshine. So it was only at V3, so the growing point was still below the ground. So I expect recovery, but it was looking very, very sad. So a little bit of moisture would have helped after that wind came through. And I saw people planting last night in Tazewell County. We do have a lot of fields that have been newly planted in the last few days, but there are still some that have been untouched or just getting the cover crop terminated. So I talked to Steve Pitstick yesterday morning. He actually, his corn is V4, V5, so he's way ahead of anything down here. Said it's the earliest corn they've had in several years. So it was looking good up there, and he was talking about post-emergence herbicides, and I still have people talking about pre. So other than that, I had soybeans that flowered last week in McLean County. Those were planted on February 27th, which I know is early, but Wade Farms usually put some in. at that time. And so they have those flowering, and otherwise I have a lot of beans that aren't even out of the ground yet. So it is definitely two extremes.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit last growing season, whether there's a drought and then the derecho came through. I hear a lot of it's one extreme or the other for a lot of people, and that's definitely not good news and something that is hard to keep up with too, because it sounds like, I know Stephanie, you said that it's going to be an interesting season with things going all over the place and scouting and keeping track. So
We
this
need it to
definitely
keep
helps.
raining to kind of mask all those mistakes. If it dries off, it's going to get ugly fast.
I did see a meteorologist I follow. He said the next week and a half, 2 weeks below normal temperatures. I didn't look at the precipitation, but I woke up this morning 50 degrees outside. Wasn't used to that. So we'll see what happens. Eric, you want to round us out?
Yeah, definitely. So, a lot of the cornfields and stuff that I've been walking lately have been, anywhere from that V3 to all the way up to maybe say V6. It seems like every year I can reflect back and kind of, there's a few dates in there that we definitely should not have been planting corn or maybe even soybeans. And I will say thus far, as far as the corn and everything I've looked at, looks like that April 14th, 15th date maybe wasn't the best time to be planting just because of all the cold and maybe wet and at times very wet conditions we faced after that. I'm still seeing a lot of heartburn from corn that was planted in those conditions as far as onion leafing, just irregular growth habits. And then not to mention a lot of that earlier planted corn. I'm seeing a lot of evidence. I don't know if anybody else has seen it, but it's not severe, but looks like corn borer has actually moved through the area where we're actually getting that shotgun effect on the leaves that were, some of those earlier leaves, and it's just on one or two leaves. And so, obviously our traits are still working and everything, but that just goes to show with just the weather patterns and everything we've had a lot of stuff blow through the area, as far as moths and whatnot this year. Weed control and everything, as far as with pre's and everything, it kind of seems like growers have kind of got maybe brain fog or whatever, just because of how extended this planting season has been. That, I've been getting a lot of questions about why are my pre's breaking so soon? But when we actually start to do the math and work backwards, we are coming up on that 4-week time frame, and it really is time to be spraying pre's. I will say that pre's maybe are not working quite as well, but it's just because of the amount of moisture we've had, and so a lot of those pre's have gotten diluted, and we're maybe having to come back. Also getting a lot of questions or growers concerned about water hemp. I've been appreciating all the concerns about water hemp, getting water hemp under control this year. But the one thing that does concern me is that there's a lot of talk of using dicamba in corn this year. And so with just everything with dicamba, the scrutiny, agriculture being under the microscope, just really want to preface that if we are considering dicamba applications in corn for post-emerge, that we're really doing the best steward, follow the same rules and regulations. A lot of them that have been put forth for soybeans, consider those. And then also some of those adjuvant replacements that we've used in soybean applications, like the DRAs, the true AMS replacements, using those type of things to minimize any type of off-target movement. So just want to kind of throw that general recommendation out there for growers that if you are considering dicamba and corn, to maybe consider some of those best management practices that we've used in soybeans. As far as soybeans, don't have, about maybe V2, V3 is about as big as soybeans that I'm seeing in our area. And a lot of soybeans went into, some soybeans got finished up planting last week ahead of the big rain event that was kind of unexpected last Friday. And so dealing with some heartburn from that of crusting and everything. And so unfortunately, some of those fields, they actually I think they need another rain on them to go ahead and loosen them up and getting them up out of the ground. I hate to say we need some rain, but some of those soybeans fields I think could really benefit a rain from there. But yeah, that's what I've got. Well, that's a lot of what I'm seeing in our area.
Thanks, Eric. And Shelby, do you want to go off anything or have anything to add?
Sure. Mimic kind of what Eric said, as well as, you know, we got that rain a week ago. Otherwise, there had been a lot of progress made. There was a lot of corn and soybeans put in the ground prior to last Friday when we received that rain early. Really wasn't supposed to start raining until about 5 o'clock. There were a lot of growers going for done that afternoon. And then our showers started popping up about 1 o'clock and came hard and heavy in this territory. We had right here in Flatville, we had 8 tenths in less than 45 minutes. There was a grower about 6 miles as the crow flies that had 3 inches in less than an hour. Came very fast out of nowhere. I think I put in my crop report last week that my dad was planting a field and he was driving back to the farm, and he said he had never driven through so much standing water in a tractor, which generally we don't have our equipment out in the rain, but got caught in that. He said there was just water everywhere as fast as it came. We literally had a flash flood here. And then to mimic what Eric had said, that, you know, some of these pre's are not working. Your pre's are down in the ditch, down the river, because they've been washed off now. I mean, as fast as some of this water moved, it's took the soil, it took everything with it. So we're really going to probably see some issues in those territories that, you know, weeds are going to start popping up because your chemical is no longer there. It got washed away. So my biggest concern is water hemp right now, especially in some cornfields. There's a field not far from here that the corn is probably, I'm going to say, almost 12 inches tall. The water hemp is 5 inches tall or 6 inches tall. And again, probably going to have to be using dicamba, and this concerns me because there's a bean field right across the road, and we've got issues already that the bullseye is on us, that we're going to have some problems. So it's going to be interesting to kind of scary what guys are going to do. But prior to that rain, we had some pretty darn good looking crops. I'm still excited for soybeans. A lot of the beans still look good. Corn's going to struggle here where it stayed wet, but I think there'll be some replant there and a little bit of replant in beans. All of my growers that I've talked to were not terribly concerned. The water got away fairly quickly, so I don't think we're going to have a major replant situation here, but there'll be some that gets taken care of. But we'll just kind of see how it trickles out. The ground is hard. We are going to need a little rain this weekend to soften things up to help corn and beans come on through that soil surface.
Thanks, Shelby. My question now for all of you, hearing that it's time to start scouting for that post application, is it going to be too wet in some of those fields to do it? So therefore, what's your recommendation then?
2 days ago, it was too wet. Yesterday, I was walking some fields and it's bone dry on top. You know, we're still going to have some moisture underneath, but I think you could walk across a lot of fields at this point easily, and get a good idea of where you need to be.
I know in our area, we're pretty much past the post on most fields, but they are side dressing too. So I failed to mention that. So we have a lot of nitrogen going on too now. Yeah, I think this goes back to what we talked about, and it's going to be all different growth stages, and it's going to be hard, and people are going to assume that they're going to need to put their posts on all at the same time, and that's not going to happen. This is going to be a field by field basis. So, and then on top of that, you know, like what you said, is it dry or not? Yeah, but is it time to go or not? You know, you need to scout for the weeds and weed height as well.
Also, the one thing that comes to mind in that is, please, growers, take a breath when you're doing your post application and think. So one thing that I'm afraid of is, as we're jumping from corn to maybe beans and back and forth, and we're going to have variable kind of application windows here. Let's not take contamination issues. Let's not think, oh, we can hang our boom over here and it's all Liberty tolerant, for example, or something like that, and forget that we've got corn killer in the tank, things along those lines. I've seen those. We don't have any room really for error with the crop that we've got out there, because of some of the adversity that it's trying to grow through. So I know we're going to be being pulled a million different directions, but some of those things can really be detrimental if we get out there, and it's very hard at this point to kind of come back from them. Second kind of thing I would mention is, I forgot to mention this in the crop report, would be we are probably going to see some rapid growth syndrome, some yellowing of some of this corn, especially in the V3 to V5 growth stage. Now, if we stay wet, that'll help out a little bit. But what I found is a lot of that subsoil is pretty hard. It might have been a little bit wetter than we thought it was when we planted. And it's going to be really, really hard for that root system to get established and be able to feed that upper portion of the above ground portion of the plant that is really growing fast right now. So we've got beautiful growing conditions with the sunshine, with the temperatures, and it may be a little tough, for that root system to feed that above ground portion.
I think, yeah, some of that I've seen as I drove maybe towards, it could be Eric's area, and he kind of mentioned to this, as I drove towards Bloomington from the south, it's just a lot of the corn is just very uneven due to a lot of the water and probably the root systems, and it just looks ugly at a certain point. So I've seen that a lot of just driving across the countryside, but of course it's not all. It's just certain growth stages, certain fields. I'm probably relation to drainage, and when it was planted. So
Any other scouting observations you've seen or heard from anyone else, or something we haven't covered yet?
I know the bean leaf beetles seem to be gone, but I saw quite a bit of feeding, nothing major, but more so than I've ever seen before, in different fields, in different growth stages too. Not necessarily just early planted fields. So
There's been some fields in Iowa that have been hailed on 3 times now. And they're only about the V4 or V5 stage. So they're worried about, some of the fields had really bad Physoderma stalk rot a few years ago. So they're worried about, if it keeps raining, that's going to be an issue, particularly with the hybrids that they chose for some of those fields. I've had some calls about giant ragweed getting away in the soybeans. I would just make sure that when you put on herbicides, we're not cutting rates anymore. You need to be within the rate range, hopefully towards the middle of that range, and not on the low end, to make sure that you have long enough residual and that you can get some of those controlled. Because the giant ragweed, once it's 6 inches tall, it's pretty hard to actually kill off. You can wound it pretty bad, but it's hard to really get completely rid of. So, and as long as you're doing your post-emerge, make sure that you check your crop growth stage, especially if you've lost leaves. Make sure that you figure out exactly where you are. A lot of our herbicides go out at V7, some at V6. Not all of them are by the height. So make sure that you are aware of what your restrictions are.
Speaking of Iowa too, I think they're officially out of their drought. I saw a chart that some areas are having their 4th wettest spring ever. So they're getting the rain, but maybe they're like, we're good. We don't need any more for now. But it sounds like it might just keep coming. Anything else to add?
Never wish rain away.
Yesterday, I was in some looking at some post-emerge herbicide control, evaluating control and everything in some corn, and visiting with the salesperson that made the recommendation and the application. One thing that kind of sticks out to me, and it's kind of like it's a argument that I have every year with growers and things sometimes, that all the major retailers or and adjuvant manufacturers and everything, they've all got some type of AMS, water conditioning type product that's also got some drift reduction agencies and things built into it to that nature. I just want to remind everybody that those type of products do not provide surfactancy. They're mainly water conditioners and then some added goodies. So just want to kind of remind everybody that with these post-emerge applications, most of all of our post-emerge applications require some type of surfactancy, whether it's on the low end with an NIS or on the high end with an MSO, and crop oil being right there in the middle. We need to make sure we're including some type of surfactancy too with our post herbicide applications, because or at least I don't know if everybody else deals with this with their growers and things, but it seems like this is kind of an area that has to be revisited with a lot of growers I work with in this part of the world, is making sure we have the proper amount of surfactancy, and then even remembering that our corn killers that we have, our fusillades, our select maxes, clethodim, whatever you want using, those products like oil. And so we need to include oil with those products, even if they're at a low rate of oil, depending on maybe the type of active ingredient formulations we have in there. But just remembering some of those surfactancies that, if we are getting in some challenging water hemp control, especially as the crop gets a little bit bigger, having the right surfactancy could be the matter of making a successful application or not. So
switching gears real quick before we finish up, I want to talk about wheat real quick. Stephanie, I know you got a text yesterday. Kelly said wheat harvest started yesterday in Hamilton County, 21% moisture. Just curious if anyone else has heard wheat harvest starting in some areas, or what's that looking like? I think the Wheat Association with their tour, they were looking at, they're forecasting 107 bushel state average yield this year. So I don't know if anyone has any reports or any thoughts on our wheat side as harvest starts to go there.
Wheat is starting to turn in my area. We don't have a lot of it here. I would say we're just about on the line. And I noticed that over the weekend, but really it is a lot of these earlier maturing varieties that are going. And I think a lot more are planting those in order to get their double crop in earlier. And so we may see a lot of people going on wheat really quickly. And they still don't have everything planted on top of that. So corn and soybeans. So it's going to be quite the sprint for them.
All right, as we wrap up here, anything else you want to share? Anything that should be on farmers' radars that they're not thinking of? I know we talked about today, field by field basis, know what you're doing, stopping and thinking, because it sounds like there's going to be a lot of multitasking because everything is everywhere. Any final messages or reminders that you want to get out there?
I guess I had a call now that I remember another one from Northern Illinois. It was a replant situation with beans, and it's always tough. I know we can usually leave it until you get, and we were faced with this last year at like a 50,000 stand. We talked through what I was concerned with, and I've seen in the past is you go back in, of course, you don't tear it up, you go back and plant, and you can get it really thick. And that's a watch out for white mold, especially in that area. And that's something we talk through. And so just something to keep in mind.
The only thing I was gonna, I guess, kind of mention, or I kind of asked the panel about. So we talked a lot about sandblasting, hail, and so on. A lot of injury to this crop at this growth stage. We know the crown rot moves in right around where we're at now, kind of V2, 3 to V5, V7, somewhere in there. Depending on your fields, we're seeing a lot of moisture. I'm in certain situations recommending a fungicide in with the post application, especially corn fields, heavy residues, fields with a history of issue, more so as an insurance policy for late season intactness and a few things like that. I guess I would be interested to hear the panel's point of view or what they're maybe kind of recommending around that.
I think it's going to be a wait and see type of a thing to see if the disease is moving or not. And I think it's a little early to tell. And I think a lot of people are going to be questioning whether or not they use a fungicide, especially on the late planted stuff, and because of commodity prices.
I'm meaning more just in the post app. So like in the next, while putting in a half rate with the post application, just to kind of try to ward off some of the injury that we've got.
I would not recommend it. No.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say, there's rates on the labels for a reason. And I've heard this directly from some of the chemical manufacturers, if they thought that they could sell half again as much fungicide by half rate, they'd have it on the label. And just remember too, that a lot of these stock rots, I mean, you look at the fungicide labels and a lot of them, maybe say suppression or no control at all. So I guess really, what are we trying to target, and does the label support it?
That's a good comment, just because there's some areas too that they're recommending on every acre, which is not something that would be indicative that we would want.
All right, we're running up on our half hour here. I don't want to hold you guys too much, but we'll be back next week with more conversation and discussion, and hopefully planting progress has moved down in southern Illinois, but I guess we'll wait and see and talk more. So thank you all. Appreciate you coming in on this Thursday morning, and we'll talk more next week.